My name's Neil Wilkin and I'm a curator at the British Museum. And welcome to my corner. In my job I study the Bronze Age in Britain and in Europe, and it's a period I'm really passionate about. It lasts about 1,000 years, which is a really long time, but in that time lots of changes happen, revolutions if you like, and those changes are still with us today. We still feel their implications. With the Bronze Age, we see the first introduction of metal, of this new material. And we have to try to imagine a world in which people hadn't seen metal objects. We're surrounded by it, our buildings are made of it, our planes, our cars. Imagine how magical it would have seemed to see someone melting this raw material into a liquid gold and then making something completely new. It's difficult to try to find a parallel in our lifetimes for a completely new material. But maybe if we think about all the fuss and interest that's around something like 3D printing or Wi-Fi or the internet, we're getting almost close, but I think it would have been even more impressive to Bronze Age people to see the first production of metal. It would have been like seeing something from outer space. We tend to think that from the very beginning of the Bronze Age people were making weapons and swords, but that's not true. It takes people centuries before they start to make objects that look like swords. And we have an object here that relates to that change, to that revolution, that was almost its symbol, if you like. And I'm going to show it to you now. This is a beaker pot, and you might be disappointed because I promised I was going to talk about the Bronze Age, and here I am with a clay pot. But the point is that these vessels, these drinking vessels, were associated with a new group of people. A group of people who are known as the beaker people or the beaker folk. And they brought the new technology of metalwork with them from the continent, from Europe. Pots like these were as powerful and important as the metalwork. Although there's other materials during the Bronze Age, metal is still a big deal. And I've got an object here that shows how big a deal it was during that period, and I'm going to show it to you now. This is something that looks like it should be in the Game of Thrones, but actually it's a Middle Bronze Age dirk. A dirk is a kind of technical term, a jargon term, not a very helpful term for a sword. It's a big sword. But this particular one, this particular dirk, was never made to be used. And we know that because it's completely blunt. It's never had a handle attached to it. And there's 5 other examples of these from across Europe. None of them have any evidence of ever having been sharpened or used. So it kind of begs the question, what were these? What were they used for? And the only answer that I can come up with is that they were symbols. They were symbols of something. They were symbols of warfare, of fighting, of battle. And I think that helps to explain a number of interesting things about how they've been discovered. This particular dirk was found pushed down into a bog by a man out walking his dog, and amazingly he stubbed his toe on it and pulled it up through this peaty boggy soil. Can you imagine stubbing your toe in something like this and wondering what it was and pulling it up through that soil and exposing this beautifully preserved metal? And it had been intentionally thrust down into a bog when it had been deposited, when it had been sacrificed. All this makes me wonder, why were people pushing such beautiful objects into bogs and losing them forever? Why were they also bending them? We have another example that was recently found nearby that had been bent and hammered so that it could no longer be used, so it lost its beauty. Why were they doing this? And what I keep coming back to is the idea that these are symbols of warfare, symbols of battle. And it seems to me quite a beautiful gesture to sacrifice something that represents conflict. To me, to my mind, that speaks of a protest, a kind of Bronze Age protest against war and conflict. When I started at the museum, I had only seen the dirk through the glass as an excited teenager. And when I got to come here and take it out of the case, I wondered, what could we do with it? How can we explore its significance for Bronze Age people in new ways? The one thing that really caught my attention was that the 6 we know of from Europe are all likely to have come from the same workshop, possibly from the same master craftsperson. We've been working on a really exciting project with UCL called micropasts.
Micropass is trying to bring together traditional approaches to museum archives and objects with new digital ones.
What we really want to do, and what Micropass has been helping us to do, is to provide digital models on Sketchfab of the Dirks that we hold in our collection, and to try to unite all 6 Dirks for the first time digitally. Why that's really important to me is that often we can only show some of our objects in the galleries, but we have lots of other exciting objects behind the scenes. If we can show them in 3D models and allow people to download them and print them, we're able to get those objects out to a much wider audience. Using the model that the public's helped us to make, we've been able to print one of the Dirks in our collection. And I have the 3D print here. It's in 2 parts, which is really interesting because although our technology's come on so far, we're still only able to print something as big as this in 2 parts that we have to fit together. And I think in some ways that's testament to how difficult it is to make an object as big as the ceremonial Dirk. We struggle now, so how difficult was it during the Bronze Age? And what's nice is that being able to make something like this has led to lots of other possibilities. Because we can do what we want with a 3D print, we've been able to ask Neil Burridge, a metalworker, to start to make a replica using the 3D print as a mould for the new Dirk. And we have a prototype of Neil's Dirk here. It's, you can see, got the solder line where he's had to join the 2 parts, but when he's finished we're going to have a seamless new Dirk. This is an experiment. We're hoping to refine it and improve it, and we're hoping that when we get the finished Dirk that my team and I will be able to bend it and record that process, and we're really hoping that we can share both the process of making it and bending it with you in the future. The reason we want to bend the Dirk is we're not really sure how or why they did it. It must have required a huge amount of force and really quite a violent act. And what we want to understand, and what you might have ideas about as well, is how they did it. Did they heat up the metal, or did they do it when the metal was still cold? And all those things are things that we can test by making a Dirk and then destroying it.
That was my corner. If I could nominate any other curator to swap with, it would be Ben Alsop, because he curates the City Money Gallery, and during the Bronze Age there's no coins and no medals, so I'd really like to know more about that side of the museum.